The grand palace of the Zerath Empire stood tall and shining, built from crystal towers that touched the clouds. Yet inside its walls, fear and anger mixed in the air like poison. War drums had finally gone silent after 20 long years of endless battles against humanity. But peace had come with a price, one the royal family never thought they would pay. Princess Yalara, daughter of Emperor Theros, sat frozen in her chamber. Her golden skin shimmered faintly in the morning light, and her four-jeweled head crests, symbols of her royal bloodline, drooped with exhaustion. The news had struck her like a blade through the heart. She was to be married off not to a prince of her people, not to a warrior of Zerath, but to a human. Her father's words still echoed in her mind. Peace must be sealed in blood, daughter. Only a marriage can end this war. You will join with their most powerful commander, Admiral Marcus Kane. The humans call him the Ruthless Wolf of Earth. Yalara's hands trembled as she clutched the silken sheets of her bed. She had heard stories about humans since childhood, how they were savage predators with no honor, how they burned worlds, how their eyes showed no mercy. In every tale told by Zerath elders, humans were painted as beasts who smiled while killing. And now, she was expected to share her life with one? She turned her face toward the window where the twin suns of Zerath burned bright. They gave no comfort. A monster, she whispered. They want me to live with a monster. The royal court was tense that day. Nobles and generals lined the hall, their colorful robes rustling as they whispered behind jeweled masks. None dared to openly question the emperor's decision, but Yalara could feel their anger. General Karash, scarred from dozens of battles against humans, could not hold his tongue. Your Majesty, forgive me, he said, bowing stiffly, but sending the princess to the humans is no alliance, it is surrender. This wolf of earth is said to drink the blood of his enemies. He will devour her spirit and chain our people. The emperor, tall and heavy with age, raised his clawed hand for silence. Enough. You speak with fear, not wisdom. The humans fight. Like demons, yes, but they are also loyal to their own. I would rather trust the honor of a wolf than the betrayal of jackals among us. Do not mistake this union for weakness. It is survival. Yalara lowered her eyes as the argument swirled around her. Every word pressed against her chest like iron chains. She did not want to be survival's price. She wanted freedom, but duty gave her no choice. The day of departure came swiftly. Silver Zerath diplomatic cruiser waited in the palace hangar, its engines humming softly. Guards in shining armor escorted Yalara through long crystal corridors. She moved like a prisoner marching toward her fate, her royal robes flowing but her heart heavy. At the base of the ship's ramp, her father waited. The emperor's face was stern, but his eyes carried sorrow. He placed his heavy hand on her shoulder. My daughter, he said softly, I cannot ask your forgiveness for this, but I can ask your strength. You may see the human as an enemy today. In time, perhaps you will see more. Remember, you are Zerath. No matter where you go, that will never change. Tears stung Yalara's eyes, but she did not let them fall. She bowed her head, then walked up the ramp without looking back. The cruiser lifted off, leaving the palace behind. Through the window, Yalara saw her world shrink into the endless black of space. For the first time in her life, she was leaving home not as a princess, but as a prize of war. During the journey, Yalara sat alone in her chamber, her claws tapping nervously against the metal table. She had studied every scrap of information about her future husband. Marcus Kane, born on Earth, a soldier from youth, commander of fleets, victor of countless battles. The aliens called him Ruthless Wolf. Even humans whispered his name with fear and respect. Some claimed he destroyed entire cities to break enemy morale. Others said he never accepted surrender, only silence from his foes. And still others described him as a man who smiled in battle, his steel-gray eyes cold as ice. Yalara imagined his face, hard, scarred, and cruel. A being who lived only for blood and conquest. A predator in human skin. Her stomach twisted. They send me to a cage, she whispered. And he will be my jailer. 3 days later, the cruiser reached human space. The stars outside were littered with ships, sleek gray vessels, bristling with weapons, moving in perfect formations. Yalara's heart skipped a beat at the sight. The humans' fleet looked nothing like the ceremonial ships of her people. These were predators, metal wolves in the dark, waiting for a command to strike. Her escort announced, "Princess, we are docking with the human flagship, the Invictus. Admiral Kane awaits." The name alone made her claws dig into her palms. She forced herself to stand tall, draping her royal cloak around her shoulders. If she must face this wolf, she would not do so as prey. The airlock hissed open. Yalara stepped into the docking bay, her heart pounding. Rows of human soldiers stood in silence, armored in black and silver, their boots lined perfectly. Their faces were hard, their eyes sharp, but none showed cruelty. Instead, they saluted her with a disciplined precision that unsettled her even more. And then she saw him. At the center of the bay stood Admiral Marcus Kane. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark uniform with silver trim. His hair was black with a streak of gray at the temples. His face was scarred at the jawline, but not grotesque, more like carved stone weathered by storms. His eyes were steel gray, piercing but not wild. They held focus, not madness. Yalara froze. This was not the monster she had imagined. He looked dangerous, yes, but not unhinged. There was control in his stance, weight in his presence. Marcus Kane stepped forward. His voice was deep, calm, and steady. "Princess Yalara of Zerath, welcome aboard the Invictus." The words were not cruel, not mocking, not threatening. They were respectful. Yalara's throat tightened. She could not find her voice. Kane continued, "You will be treated with honor here. Your quarters have been prepared to your preference. If you require Zerath food or attendance, we will provide them. You are free to move within the ship. Provided for your safety, you remain escorted in military zones." He paused, his eyes steady on hers. "This union is not easy for either of us, but I hope we can build something from it. Not just for peace, but for our people." The silence in the bay was heavy. Yalara had expected chains. She had expected a predator's smirk. Instead, she found herself staring into the eyes of a man who carried the weight of war, but who spoke to her as an equal. Her claws loosened from her palms. Confusion swirled inside her. This was the ruthless wolf of Earth? The soldiers dispersed and Yalara was escorted to her quarters. The rooms were far larger than she expected, designed with soft lighting, fine materials, and even flowers. Earth flowers, fragrant and colorful. Someone had studied her culture. Someone had tried to make this place a home, not a cell. Yalara sat on the edge of the bed, her heart racing. Every story she had heard about humans clashed with what she had just seen. Perhaps it was a trick. Perhaps Marcus Kane wore a mask of honor, hiding his true nature. Yet the look in his eyes, it had not been cruel. It had been heavy, as if he carried burdens she could not yet understand. For the first time, Yalara felt not fear, but uncertainty. Maybe, just maybe, the monster she had feared was something else entirely. The corridors of the human flagship Invictus were nothing like the crystal palaces of Zerath. They were made of cold steel, polished but simple, built for function, not beauty. Every corner hummed with energy. Every hall carried the sound of boots, striking metal floors. Princess Yalara walked silently, guarded by 2 human soldiers. They kept their distance, showing no aggression, but their sharp eyes never missed a movement. She could feel the weight of their discipline. Even without speaking, they were like wolves waiting for command. Her mind raced with confusion. She had expected cages, chains, maybe even sneers. Instead, the humans had saluted her. The Admiral himself, Marcus Kane, had spoken calmly, almost respectfully. The stories of monsters and predators didn't match the man she had seen, but she did not trust it, not yet. Wolves could smile before they bit. Her quarters surprised her even more. The door opened, revealing a large chamber with soft lighting. A wide bed stood against the wall covered in fine blankets of silver and blue. A table was set with bowls of fruit from Earth, and beside them lay prepared Zareth dishes. She noticed details that made her freeze. Zareth symbols carved into the wall panel, decorations from her culture, even a small crystal lamp like those from her home palace. Someone had studied her people. Someone had tried to make this place familiar. Yalara ran her clawed fingers along the lamp. Why would humans do this? She whispered to herself. The soldiers gave no answer. They saluted once more and left her alone. Hours later, a soft chime echoed through the room. The door opened and Marcus Kane stepped inside. Yalara stiffened, her tail curling in defense. She had been trained never to show weakness, but her heart pounded anyway. Kane removed his gloves, placing them on the table. He did not sit, not yet. Instead, he stood tall, but not threatening. "I wanted to see if your quarters are acceptable," he said. His voice was steady, the same calm tone as before. "If something is missing, you may request it. My crew will arrange it." Yalara blinked. She had expected commands, not questions. She forced her voice to remain cold. "You built me a cage with flowers. That does not make it less a cage." Kane did not flinch. "It is not meant to be a cage. This is your space, princess. You will have privacy here. No soldier will enter without permission." "Why?" Yalara narrowed her eyes. "Because you wish to fool me into believing you are kind?" For the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. Not cruel, but tired. "No. Because I know what it means to lose freedom. I will not take yours, even if politics demand it." His words unsettled her more than anger would have. She expected threats. Instead, she found sincerity. The next days passed in strange rhythm. Yalara was allowed to walk the ship, always with an escort. She saw humans working, pilots checking controls, engineers repairing panels, medics tending to the injured. To her surprise, they were not monsters. They laughed, argued, even told jokes. Some looked at her with curiosity, but none with hate. When she entered the mess hall, silence fell for a moment. Dozens of soldiers watched her, their forks paused mid-air. Yalara felt her scales prickle. Then Marcus Kane entered behind her, and instantly, every soldier rose to their feet and saluted. He nodded to them, at ease. The soldiers obeyed, returning to their meals. Yalara noticed something then. The way they looked at him. Not with fear, not like slaves to a tyrant. They looked at him with respect, even trust. Some eyes carried admiration, as if they would follow him anywhere. This too was different from the stories. Later, Yalara found herself in the training deck. The air smelled of sweat and metal. Human soldiers sparred in pairs, their movements fast and brutal. They used strange weapons and close combat techniques. Marcus Kane stood among them, not as an observer, but as a participant. He wore simple, training clothes, his scarred arms bare. He fought 2 soldiers at once, blocking strikes, countering, even taking hits without slowing down. When one soldier fell, Marcus helped him up before continuing the drill. Yalara watched silently from the upper platform. When the session ended, Marcus dismissed his men. Sweat dripped from his brow, his chest rising with heavy breaths. He looked up and saw Yalara watching. Instead of boasting, he simply said, "Training is survival. I cannot ask my men to face pain I do not endure myself." That struck her deeply. On Zerath, commanders often stood apart, distant from their soldiers. But this human fought beside them. No wonder they followed him with such loyalty. One evening, Yalara sat at her table, tasting human food for the first time. It was strange, rich with spices she had never known. She was still adjusting when Marcus entered quietly. "You dislike it?" he asked. She looked at him cautious. "It is different." He chuckled lightly, the first sound of warmth she had heard from him. Different is not always bad. Yalara tilted her head. You speak as if you understand what it is to be forced into a life not your own. For a moment, Kane's eyes darkened. He sat across from her. I was born in the slums of Earth. No choices, only survival. The Navy took me in, gave me discipline, gave me purpose. But it also took much from me. Friends, family, years of peace. Every path has a cost, Princess. Yours as well as mine. Yalara was stunned. He had shared something personal, something he did not need to. Why? Why show her? His scars. Yet trust was not easily built. Whispers spread through the ship. Some humans disliked the treaty. They saw the princess as the enemy. Yalara overheard fragments of conversations. She doesn't belong here. Can't trust her kind. Wolf or not, Kane should never marry the enemy. It stung, though she hid it behind a mask of pride. But what surprised her most was Kane's reaction. When he discovered such talk, he called his officers into a meeting. Yalara, hidden by the shadows of the corridor, overheard him. She is under my protection, Kane said firmly. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any man who cannot accept peace has no place on my ship. There was silence. Then the officers nodded. No argument. Yalara's chest tightened with something she could not name. This man, who had every reason to hate her kind, defended her instead. The first true test came during a diplomatic message exchange. A Zerath warship sent a transmission. The captain sneered at Kane through the screen. So this is the human wolf. You chain our princess to your side like a trophy? Do you plan to break her as you broke our fleets? Yalara's claws dug into the armrest of her chair. She braced, for Kane to smirk to claim victory. Instead, he said coldly, The princess is not a trophy. She is my equal in this treaty. Any insult toward her is an insult toward Earth. Remember that before you speak again. The Zerath captain's sneer faltered. He cut the connection. Yalara sat frozen. She could not believe what she had heard. Equal. He had called her equal. Her heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with confusion. That night, alone in her quarters, Yalara stared at her reflection in the crystal lamp. Her father's words returned to her. Perhaps you will see more, she whispered. He does not act like the monster they told me about. He fights like a wolf, yes, but he protects too. She touched her chest, feeling the steady thrum of her heart. The fear was still there, yes. But now it mixed with something far more dangerous. Curiosity. For the first time since leaving home, Yalara wondered, what if the ruthless human is not ruthless at all? What if he is something else? The days on the human flagship Invictus passed with strange rhythm. Princess Yalara was slowly learning that humans were not exactly what her people had always claimed. They were rough, yes. Loud, yes. But cruel? She was beginning to doubt. Everywhere she looked, humans worked with discipline. Soldiers trained, officers argued over tactics, engineers repaired broken systems. They were always moving, always busy, always fighting to be better. It was unsettling. The Zerath were proud, elegant, and slow to change. Humans were different. They were restless flames, never still. And at the center of it all was Marcus Kane. He carried himself like a man born from war. He trained with his soldiers, ate with them, and shared their hardships. His reputation as the ruthless wolf of Earth hung over him like a shadow. But the man she saw did not gloat. He was calm, stern, and strangely protective of those under his command. Yalara did not know what to make of him. One night, Yalara found herself standing on the observation deck staring out at the endless stars. The void was silent, but her thoughts were loud. You are far from home. She turned quickly. Kane had entered without her noticing. His uniform was unbuttoned at the collar, and for the first time, he looked less like an admiral and more like a man. I cannot sleep, Yalara admitted softly. The stars are the same, but the spaces between them feel colder. Kane stepped beside her. War changes how we see the galaxy. When I was younger, the stars felt like dreams. Now they feel like battlefields waiting to happen. She glanced at him. His steel-gray eyes reflected the starlight, filled with memories she could not imagine. For a moment, she saw not the wolf, but the man beneath. But before she could speak, again the ship's alarm screamed, "Red alert." The deck shook violently. Outside, ships appeared from the shadows, sleek, jagged raiders, painted in the dark colors of no official flag. Pirates. Or worse, mercenaries paid by someone who wanted. Peace destroyed, Yalara gripped the railing. "What is happening?" Kane's voice hardened. "We are under attack. Stay here." But she shook her head. "No, I will not cower while others fight for my life." For the first time, Kane's lips twitched in something close to approval. He nodded once, then tapped his comm. "All units, battle stations, protect the princess." The Invictus roared to life. Human warships moved into formation, guns blazing as they intercepted the raiders. Explosions lit up the void like fireworks, shaking Yalara's chest with every flash. Kane stood in the command center, giving orders with sharp precision. "Port batteries. Fire at will. Shields at full strength. Do not let them breach the hangar." His officers obeyed instantly, voices calm even as alarms blared. Yalara stood near the edge of the command deck, watching in awe. The humans were fierce, but they were not chaotic. They fought like a pack, each ship supporting the other, each move flowing into the next. Still, the raiders were cunning. One ship broke through the defenses and rammed into the side of the Invictus. Metal screamed as corridors shook. The invaders boarded. "Boarding parties," shouted an officer. Kane grabbed a rifle from the wall and turned to his soldiers. "With me." Yalara's breath caught. The admiral himself was going into battle? On Zarath, leaders stayed safe while soldiers bled. But Kane, he was already moving. The corridors became a war zone. Human soldiers clashed with armored raiders, plasma bolts flashing, blades clashing in close combat. The air filled with smoke, and the metallic stench of blood. Yalara, shielded by two guards, watched Kane fight at the front. He moved like a storm, every strike precise, every shot deadly. He disarmed one raider with a twist, smashed another against the wall, then turned his rifle on a third. His face was cold, his eyes sharp, but there was no madness. Only focus. Only will. This was the ruthless wolf. Not because he enjoyed killing, but because he refused to yield. He fought with everything, never stopping, never breaking. A raider slipped past the line, charging toward Yalara. She froze, claws rising too slow. A gunshot echoed. The raider fell. Kane stood before her, rifle smoking. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice hard. For the first time, Yalara obeyed without protest. The fighting raged for what felt like hours. Kane never faltered. His soldiers followed him without hesitation, as if his strength gave them strength. When one man fell, Kane pulled him back to safety before pressing forward again. When ammo ran low, he fought with blade and fist, brutal but controlled. Yalara could not look away. She had feared a monster. Instead, she saw a leader who bled with his men, who risked himself to protect even her, the daughter of his enemy, Tabre. The last raider was cut down. The corridors were littered with sparks, smoke, and groans of the wounded. Kane stood tall, his uniform torn, blood streaking his arm. "Status?" he barked. "Borders neutralized," an officer answered. "Casualties, but the ship holds." Kane nodded once. His eyes turned to Yalara. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, speechless. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Around them, soldiers moved, medics rushed, alarms still wailed. But Yalara's mind was fixed on the man, before her. He was terrifying, yes. Ruthless in battle, yes. But his ruthlessness had purpose. He fought not for glory, not for cruelty, but for survival, for protection. The monster she had feared did not exist. The truth was far more complex. Later, in the medbay, Yalara watched Kane refuse treatment until his men were cared for. Only after every soldier was stable did he sit, allowing a medic to patch his wound. "Why?" she asked quietly. Kane looked at her, confused. "Why what? Why risk yourself? You are their leader. If you had fallen, they would have lost everything. Yet you stood in front even when you did not need to." Kane's eyes softened just a little. "Because no leader deserves loyalty if he does not share the danger of his people. They follow me because they know I will bleed with them. That is the only kind of command I believe in." Yalara's chest tightened. She thought of her own people, her own generals who stood safe behind walls while soldiers died. She thought of her father, who sacrificed her to secure peace. And then she looked at this human, scarred and unyielding, who fought like a beast but cared like no Zereth lord ever had. Something inside her shifted. That night, Yalara lay awake in her quarters. The image of Marcus Kane would not leave her mind. His cold eyes in battle, his hand steady as he pulled her from danger, his voice commanding yet protective. He was not the monster she had feared, but he was not gentle either. He was something else, something dangerous but not evil. She touched her chest, whispering to herself, "Humans are ruthless, but not without reason. They are ruthless because they will not let go of what they protect." Her fear was still there, but now it was tangled with something else, respect. And that respect was far more frightening, because respect could become trust. The days following the raid left the Invictus buzzing with activity. Repairs had been made, injured soldiers patched up, and patrols doubled. But even in the calm, tension lingered. Someone had attacked the humans, and worse, someone had dared to breach the princess's safety. Yalara could not shake the memory of Marcus Kane at the front line, his rifle smoking, his eyes cold but unwavering. The memory haunted her as she walked the corridors, her steps careful, her claws tapping nervously on the metal floors. She had begun to see humans differently, not monsters, fierce, yes, but loyal, disciplined, protective. And Marcus Kane. She had never imagined someone so ruthless could also be so honorable. But her growing trust was fragile. She still did not know all the enemies who lurked within and outside the galaxy. It happened on the 5th day. Yalara had been walking near the hangar, observing human ships dock and unload supplies, when alarms screamed across the deck. Red lights flashed. Her guards tensed. "Princess," one soldier shouted, "intruders on board." Before she could react, a group of armored figures appeared from the shadows. They were Zereth extremists, rogue soldiers who opposed the peace treaty. They had infiltrated the ship. Yalara's claws rose in defense, but the intruders were fast. They struck the guards first, knocking them aside. The last thing she saw before being dragged away was the sharp face of a human soldier, his eyes wide, with alarm as she disappeared down a maintenance shaft. She was trapped, alone, and terrified. Hours passed. Yalara was confined in a small, dimly lit cell, deep within the ship. The walls were cold, metal pressing against her back. Her head spun, with fear and anger. How dare they? How dare her own people betray her? "They think they can use me as a pawn," she whispered. "But I will not give them the satisfaction." She tried to push against the walls, clawing at the metal, but it was useless. The extremists had chained her hands. Her scales glimmered, faintly in the dim light, a sign of her rising fear and anger. And yet even in the darkness a small flame of hope lingered. She had seen Marcus Kane fight. She had seen the wolf of humans face impossible odds and survive. Perhaps, just perhaps, he would come for her. Meanwhile, Marcus Kane had already discovered the breach. The Invictus's alarms had alerted the bridge. Kane stormed into the command center, his uniform torn from the earlier raid, his face set in grim determination. "Status report," he barked. "Princess Yalara is missing," an officer said, voice tense. "Intruders took her, they're rogue Zerath soldiers." Kane's jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists. "How many?" "7 confirmed," the officer replied. They were armed and highly trained. Security footage shows them leaving through maintenance shafts. Kane's steel gray eyes narrowed. Then we move fast. Prepare a rescue team. I'm leading this personally. The officers hesitated. Sir, that's dangerous. They are well armed. Dangerous? Kane interrupted, his voice low and cold. She is my responsibility. If I do not get her back, every effort to end this war will fail. Suit up or get out of my way. They obeyed without question. Marcus Kane had no hesitation. The wolf never abandoned the pack. The corridors were a blur of motion as Kane led his elite soldiers through maintenance shafts and service tunnels. Alarms echoed, lights flashed, and the metal walls of the ship vibrated with tension. They moved, like shadows, silent but deadly. Kane signaled, and his soldiers split to cut off escape routes. Every move was calculated. Every decision had purpose. In a small cell, Yalara heard footsteps approaching. Her heart raced. Was this the end? Or was it the man she had begun to trust? The lock clicked. The door swung open. Kane stepped in, rifle at the ready, eyes scanning. Every shadow. Princess Yalara, he said firmly. You are coming with me. Yalara stared. The man she had feared as a monster, the ruthless wolf, was here. Alive, fearless, and dangerous. She wanted to speak, to protest, but her voice caught in her throat. He extended a hand, and she saw the same calm determination that had saved her during the previous attack. Trust me, Kane said. It took everything inside her not to flinch, and yet, she did trust him. Somehow, despite everything, she trusted him. The extremists attacked immediately. Plasma blades slashed through the corridor. Kane fired his rifle with deadly precision, hitting targets before they could strike. His soldiers followed his lead, moving as one, unstoppable. Yalara watched from behind Kane, her fear rising but also something else. Admiration. He fought like a storm, ruthless but controlled. Every movement had purpose. Every shot protected. Her orator lunged at Yalara from the side. Kane caught him mid-swing, twisting the arm and sending him crashing against the wall. He did not pause. He never paused. Stay close, he barked, and she obeyed instinctively. They fought their way through the maze of tunnels, enemies falling before them. Kane's voice never wavered, always giving commands, always shielding his people and the princess. At one point, Yalara realized something astonishing. These humans, even in combat, moved with loyalty and trust, not fear. Kane did not intimidate them to follow. He inspired them to fight beside him. And now she understood why his people called him Ruthless. Not because he enjoyed killing, but because he would not let anyone harm those under his protection. And she was under his protection. Finally, they reached the room where Yalara had been held. The last of the extremists stood between them and freedom. Kane raised his rifle, firing precise shots, disabling weapons without killing. Then, with a fluid motion, he drew a blade from his belt and moved forward, his soldiers backing him up. Yalara watched in awe as he fought. Every strike, every movement was deliberate. He was terrifying, but not cruel. The wolf had teeth, yes, but only to defend, not destroy indiscriminately. The last extremist fell, and silence filled the room. Kane wiped his blade, then turned to Yalara. Are you unharmed? He asked, his tone softening just slightly. She nodded, unable to speak. Her throat was dry, her chest tight. Later, as they returned to the main deck, Yalara could not stop thinking. The man she had feared as a monster had risked his life for her safety, for her freedom. She realized something profound. Humans were not monsters because of their ruthlessness. They were dangerous because they loved and protected fiercely. And Kane was dangerous because he cared more for others than for himself. The thought was terrifying, not because of fear, but because it was unexpected. For the first time, Yalara felt something she could not name, a mixture of awe, respect, and something warmer. That night, she stood on the observation deck once more. Kane joined her silently. You saved me, she said softly. When I thought all hope was lost, you came. He looked at her, calm, but tired. You are not a prize to rescue. You are a person, and I will not let anyone use you as a pawn. That is my choice, not duty. Yalara swallowed hard. She had expected a monster, a tyrant, a human who would terrify her. Instead, she had found a protector, a warrior, a man who fought not for glory but for what he valued. She finally understood why the humans had feared him as ruthless. It was not cruelty. It was love turned into unyielding strength. Yalara's scales shimmered faintly in the starlight, her heart pounding. Fear had been replaced, at least partially, with something stronger. Something dangerous. Trust. The wedding day was set aboard the Invictus, in a grand hall illuminated with lights from both human and Zerath designs. The galaxy watched, some with hope, some with disbelief. After years of war, this marriage symbolized the chance for peace. But it also made both humans and Zerath vulnerable to enemies who would rather see war continue. Princess Yalara stood at the entrance, her golden scales glimmering softly, her head crests high with pride. Gone was the fear she had carried when first leaving her home. Now she carried a different weight, the realization that trust could be stronger than fear. Marcus Kane stood at the front, his uniform polished, eyes calm but alert. He was the ruthless wolf of Earth to the galaxy. But here, in front of the princess and their people, he was more than a reputation. He was a protector, a leader, and perhaps the man Yalara had begun to understand, and even respect. The ceremony began peacefully, the alien and human delegations watching in silence. Yalara took her step forward and Marcus extended his hand. She hesitated only for a moment, then took it. And then, the first sign of danger appeared. From the observation balcony above, a small group of extremists, Zerath and human alike, opened fire. Plasma bolts tore through the hall, cutting decorations, flashing across armored soldiers, and sending delegates diving for cover. The extremists had planned an ambush, hoping to kill both the princess and her human consort in one blow, ending the treaty before it began. Chaos erupted instantly. Kane reacted before anyone else. "Security! Protect the princess!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the panic. His rifle flashed repeatedly, taking out threats with deadly precision. Soldiers moved instantly, forming protective lines around Yalara. Kane did not stand back. He moved forward, positioning himself between the attackers and the people. Yalara's heart raced, not with fear this time, but with awe. The man who had once terrified her with stories of ruthlessness was now terrifying only to their enemies. Every shot, every movement, was calculated. Every action protected the innocent. The extremists were skilled, but Kane and his soldiers were faster, smarter, and more cohesive. One Zerath officer lunged toward the princess with a plasma dagger. Kane intercepted him mid-step, knocking him back with a precise strike. Another raider aimed at a diplomat, and Kane fired before the shot could leave the weapon. Even amidst the battle, Kane's mind was clear. Every move saved lives. Every decision was precise. He did not kill needlessly. He disabled, disarmed, and protected. Yalara watched, realizing why humans called him ruthless. He was ruthless, yes, but only to those who threatened what he valued. Then came the moment that changed everything. One extremist attempted to grab Yalara, dragging her toward the balcony edge. She struggled, claws flashing, but the grip was strong. She screamed. Kane leaped. Faster than she could comprehend, he caught her midair, pulling her safely onto the floor. He rolled, firing a single shot that struck the extremist's weapon and sent him tumbling back. Yalara's breath caught. The wolf, the human who had terrified her, had saved her again, risking everything. She realized fully then. He did not fight because he enjoyed violence. He fought because he cared, because he would not allow harm to touch those he swore to protect. The battle raged for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Kane's soldiers moved like extensions of his will. The extremists were clever, but the humans were relentless. They pressed forward, coordinated, inspired by Kane's presence. Even Zareth, who had doubted the humans, now saw the truth. Humans were not weak, not chaotic, not monsters. They were clever, disciplined, loyal, and above all fearless when defending what they loved. And the human strength, led by Kane, was overwhelming. Finally, the last of the extremists fell. The hall was silent save for the hum of damaged systems and the heavy breathing of soldiers. Smoke rose from shattered lights, decorations smoldered, and delegates stared in awe. Kane turned to the princess. "Are you unharmed?" Yalara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved everyone. Yourself too." He shook his head. "I do not fight for myself. I fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Her heart thumped. She had feared him, yes. She had called him ruthless. But now she understood. Ruthless was only one side of the coin. The other side, protection, loyalty, courage, was far more powerful. After the battle, the wedding ceremony resumed. Marcus Kane and Princess Yalara stood together, hand in hand, their eyes meeting with unspoken understanding. The delegates, both human and Zerath, watched in awe. Yalara raised her head. She no longer saw the humans as monsters, nor did she see Kane as a tyrant. She saw a people, and a man, who thrived in the harshest conditions, who protected those he cared for, and who fought with honor even when no one else could. And in that moment, she realized something more personal. She trusted him completely, and for the first time she allowed herself to respect, perhaps even admire, the man she had once feared. The ceremony ended with cheers. Humans and Zerath alike saw the bond between the princess and the admiral. It was more than marriage. It was a symbol. Humans were not just survivors, they were protectors. They were warriors of honor. They were capable of loyalty and courage that even the galaxy's proudest alien empires had rarely seen. Marcus Kane and Yalara left the hall together, side by side. She no longer trembled. She no longer feared. She had seen him up close, and she understood. The humans' reputation as ruthless was only part of the truth. Their ruthlessness was born from love, loyalty, and the drive to survive against impossible odds. And Kane embodied all of it. In the weeks that followed, peace talks solidified. The galaxy slowly began to accept that humans were not monsters. Stories spread of how a single admiral and his soldiers had faced impossible odds, protected an alien princess, and secured peace. Other civilizations watched, stunned, realizing that humans were not only dangerous in war, they were courageous, clever, and honorable. Yalara, once terrified, became an advocate for the humans. She spoke of their strength, their courage, and of Marcus Kane, the man she had feared but now fully trusted. And Kane. He never claimed glory. He simply continued his duty. Fierce when needed, loyal always, protective forever. He had not only defended the princess but also changed the galaxy's view of humanity. One evening, as the twin sons of Zerath set over the horizon, Yalara and Kane stood together on the observation deck. "You were called Ruthless," Yalara said softly, "but I have seen the truth. You are—" He glanced at her, curious. Strong, brave, loyal, not cruel, and perhaps the best of what humans can be. For a moment, Kane allowed a faint smile. "That is all any of us can hope to be." Yalara's scales shimmered in the fading light. "I am glad I saw you up close." "Then perhaps, Princess," he said, taking her hand, "you will see the humans up close too, and maybe you'll understand why we are ruthless only when we must be." She laughed softly. It was a sound of relief, of joy, and of respect. Fear was gone. It had been replaced by trust, and for the first time, Yalara felt not the weight of duty, but the warmth of something else. Hope. And perhaps even the beginnings of love. In that moment, the galaxy saw the truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were protectors. They were warriors. And they were capable of greatness that could not be measured by battle alone. And one human, Marcus Kane, had proven it to everyone, alien and human alike. The stars shone above, indifferent yet brilliant, and in their light, a princess and a warrior stood together, stronger than fear, braver than the darkest enemies, and united in a bond that promised peace and honor for generations to come.